Welcome everybody. Awesome to see community here on this rainy Saturday. Wow. Before we get into proceedings, I'd like to invite you all to acknowledge the land where we sit today and obviously offer our respects to the traditional custodians of this land and their elders, past, present and upcoming. Firstly, thank you. Really thank each and every one of you for being the sort of person that shows up, for coming out, sticking your neck out and asking the tough questions, getting yourselves educated on big issues, no matter how daunting they might be. It takes a certain person, and you've all proven that you're that person. So truly want to thank you and acknowledge each and every one of you for being part of this. There's an old saying, a frog, if it jumps into a pot of boiling water, it'll hop straight out. But if it's placed in cool water and that pot is slowly heated up, it'll stay in there until it's too hot and too late. I just think that's a brilliant metaphor for the human relationship to modern technology. We're all in the pot, ladies and gentlemen. We are all in the pot together. Most of us do have phones, we have Wi-Fi. And certainly we're not standing here today saying that we are opposed to any of that or opposed to technology. But what I am saying is that we need to get the temperature down before it's too late. We need to press pause and listen to the thousands of doctors and scientists worldwide who are saying that 5G is a catastrophe unfolding. So who am I? My name's Kim Sporton. I'm a local, lived in Byron for over 5 years now. I'm a journalist, 25 years experience in print, radio and TV. I'm drawn to this issue because I just cannot believe the audacity and the murkiness of this 5G rollout. And the more I find out about it, the more alarmed I'm becoming, as I'm sure many of you are. So before we get underway, we've got an amazing panel here today. I would like to invite you all to just take a moment to actually close your eyes. I'm going to paint a little picture. So if you would be so kind as to just shut your eyes momentarily, and I'd like you to imagine yourself standing at your front door. You're looking out at your patch of paradise, wherever you happen to live here in the Shire. Perhaps you can see your children, maybe your dog, your cat, playing on the front lawn. The birds are in the trees. Now just imagine in front of your house and on every few homes within your street, a small cell box mounted on a street lamp or a street sign. These boxes on each corner, outside the schools, outside the shops, outside the hospitals, literally everywhere. Now I want you to imagine that box silently pushing out radio waves, non-stop, radiation everywhere, silent, invisible, but all pervasive, and up to 100 times more powerful than the current 4G, with experts saying prolonged exposure to this will cause untold harm, health risks. It sounds a bit like a sci-fi horror movie, doesn't it? Well, that is the reality of 5G. There's no exaggeration with that. The good news is we're not alone. All across the world, people like us are rising against this and they are having victories. Several cities have banned it. We've had our own big victories even locally in the last 2 weeks. Byron Shire Council has agreed to engage in this conversation after myself and Tashi addressed them on Thursday at Council Chambers. So now is your chance. It's your chance to learn more. It's your chance to, really rise up to the calls to action we're making. Little calls to action that we're doing are making a difference. It's incredible. So, you know, we're not powerless here, guys. They have not started the rollout here, so there is time. And you showing up is it's just fabulous. So, we have an esteemed panel of guests waiting to answer questions. We're all learning as we go, so please know there is no wrong or silly question. Please just feel free to ask whatever comes to you. And we'll be very happy to do our best to address that with the appropriate person. So I'd like to introduce the panel one by one. We'll go through. So first we have Steve Tonaguzzo. Steve is the chairman of the ECSFR. This is the Environment and Community Safe from Radiation organisation. They're local. They're a network of doctors, scientists and legal experts. And these guys helped stop the Wilsons Creek Tower. They are leaders in protecting us from escalating radiation, and they have also put the Department of Education on legal notice for exposing harmful Wi-Fi to all students in New South Wales. Next we have Tashi Lamo. Tashi's from the Stop 5G Northern Rivers Group. She is a powerhouse, this lady. She joined me in addressing council, and she is a teacher, has a Bachelor of Multimedia and Communications, and she just gets shit done. She's a good one. We have Bo Sandviken, a telecommunications technician, an NBN contractor, and an installer of fibre optic, data, Wi-Fi and AV systems, who, through his role, has undertaken self-education around radiation exposure, health and safety practice. So he's going to give us a good insight into that side of it. And last but not least, we have Kelly Abelavan, the president of the Australasian Society of Building Biologists. Kelly's an environmental health consultant and a speaker focusing on wellness principles in the home, schools and workplace. She's awesome. She moved here recently from Sydney with her young family, and she's just been an absolute wealth of knowledge on all areas. She's helped me enormously with a lot of the stuff I'm doing behind the scenes with the media, and she's just going to be a great one for you to pepper her with questions about, you know, minimising risk in your own homes and your own workplaces. And then finally, the big news is that we have managed to procure the special guest barrister Ray Broomhall. Now, this is the man who's spearheading the legal battle with a 13-step plan that we can use to put the telcos on notice that we mean business. Yes. When we say we will not allow this silent assault. He's in demand worldwide, and he's giving his time up for us today. So how about a round of applause in anticipation of that? Absolutely amazing achievement. Okay, so without further ado, let's get on with the panel. I'm going to ask you all to keep your questions obviously respectful and as concise as possible, just for the sake of getting through as many as we can. And we're going to kick it off with a PowerPoint presentation by Steve.
Thank you, Kim. And thank you, Stop 5G Northern Rivers, for organising this event. We greatly appreciate that. Thank you. These are quotes from an official UN document tabled at the recent 2019 Human Rights Council General Assembly. An author of that document told me it was not well received by the UN hierarchy. Violating 15 international agreements on human rights is what we expect from a fascist or totalitarian government. The UN document identifies deception, conflicts, regulatory capture by industry, the harm of microwave radiation. It finds similarity to the tobacco and asbestos cover-up. All our major political parties support, as policy, the proliferation of cell towers. So what is electromagnetic radiation? Our big concern is microwaves. It's a broad spectrum from Earth frequencies right through to gamma cosmic rays. But in the middle there, you'll see microwave radiation. At the far end of that bracket is where we're talking 5G. And what uses microwave radiation is poison, and it is a poison, make no mistake. Pretty well all wireless technology uses microwave radiation, from 5G, Wi-Fi to children's toys. The impacts of this poison I will now run through with you. First of all, very briefly, we have environmental impacts. Small insects, okay? The reason, you'll see the number 1990 come up in a few slides, that's when the proliferation of the microwave radiation really started, okay? How many of you have recently gone for a drive through the country, particularly out west, and noticed when you finished there were no bugs on your windshield? As a kid? Yeah, as a kid that happened all the time. The rapid decline is not pesticides. We've been crop dusting and spraying since at least the 40s, if not earlier. Pollinators die. Beehives collapse. All of this is based on scientific research. I'm not making this up. Insect predators, birds, bats and frogs either die or leave the area around the towers. Plants are not pollinated or propagated because the insects are gone. Ecosystems in the long term collapse. That is a long-term trend that the ecologists are concerned about. Food production decline is happening now. A large part of that is blamed on pesticides, overwintering. Up to 40% of the bees disappearing is being suggested to be blamed on electromagnetic radiation. Power consumption. If 5G is rolled out, the scientists are saying that we will need 4 times the power consumption we have now. I mean, Australia has an alleged energy crisis, right? There's no way that we can do this, not without, say, nuclear power, and we don't want that. The Earth's ionosphere, a protected blanket, well, that's unknown. We don't know what will happen, but with 20,000 5G satellites pumping out over 5 million watts each, if we stuff it up, its planetary shields down, and we potentially end up like Mars. Now we look at EMR, energy absorption. We're constantly subjected to this radiation, all day, every day, and 5G will only make it worse by orders of magnitude. In the first one, you have the typical energy waves. In the second one, you'll see old mate standing there, and the darkness behind is the blocking of the energy. Okay, it's not getting through, and that's because the third one shows the absorption. And the red is obviously where there's a greater level of absorption, a lot around the head. Now, if we could look at if we could see electrosmog, it would probably look something like that, right? Our country is blanketed. No one escapes being put at risk of harm constantly. There are health risks from this EMR poison exposure. There are many. You can look on the internet, you can Google the research papers. Your tools of trade, Wi-Fi and cell phone, are presenting a real, undisclosed occupational hazard. Who signed a consent form? There are many symptoms of microwave radiation poisoning. So if we look at this, you'll see the blue line is the increase in microwave radiation that children have been exposed to. The red line is an increase in autism. Now, correlation is not a cause, but it is a cause for concern. This graph is fairly consistent for many medical conditions, okay, that are unexplained. So, for example, we have an 11,000% increase in chronic fatigue since 1990s. We have, I mentioned autism. Fibromyalgia, a 7,000% increase since the 1990s. Sleep apnea, 430% increase. This risk of harm is backed up by research, as I mentioned earlier. I'd recommend you all look up ORSA. They're an Australian group. Bless them, they're all volunteers, and they spend an inordinate amount of time cataloguing all of the scientific research, industry funded and otherwise independent. And now there's research and there's research. Peer-reviewed papers have gone through an academic process where peers have reviewed them, criticised it, etc. There are thousands of these papers that demonstrate harm, or risk of harm. So with risk of harm, the science and the medicine and the statistics, right, there's a lot of smoke out there, show overwhelming evidence of risk of harm. Now I'm going to focus on risk of harm for a while top here. Risk of harm does not equal safe. Harm to the environment, health and safety from EMR, it's recommended to be uninsurable by Lloyd's of London. It's disclosed as a material risk to shareholders in the annual reports of the telcos. It is not a small risk. Small risks are insurable. The Apanza mantra is no evidence of harm. So risk of harm is an undeniable fact. And to back this up, we have, as you see, Apanza would have us believe that a child using a smartphone or Wi-Fi device in school is safe. Would Apanza also prescribe that children be sprayed with DDT and drink from a lead cup? They all have the same carcinogenic classification by the World Health Organization, the IARC. As Barrister Raymond Broomhall pointed out to the Byron Shire Council, humans are part of the environment, so environmental law must be applied, and that means the precautionary principle. This principle is paramount and is embedded in most legislative instruments throughout the world. Yet towers keep going up and keep being added to. So let's look at the New South Wales Department of Education, okay? They have a legal obligation to, as you see, take reasonable steps to protect the student from foreseeable risk of harm. Did I just mention before that there is risk of harm and that is undeniable, right? You can't back down from that. So what are they doing about it? Children are dosed with poison known to cause risk of harm all day, every day as part of the school curriculum. Parents who oppose Wi-Fi in school tell us they feel bullied, not helped by the department. But thankfully, some have kept very detailed audit trails. Harming children must stop. ECSFR have issued the Department of Education with a legal notice of request. That was several months ago. And despite time being of the essence where the health of children is at risk, we have not obtained a specific response from the department that they will abide by their legal obligation. That's all we want them to do. They already have a legal obligation to protect children from risk of harm. We just want them to do that. Silence is loud. It's time to take action. Industry-funded research. Well, here's another quote for you. This is from the 2001 Australian Senate inquiry into the wireless industry. Vexed question of the influence of the telecommunications industry in the design, funding and interpretation of studies. Our government has known about this since 2001 at least, and it's very well documented in Hansard. So try to run away from the fact that you didn't know. ASIBA is the Australian research group of choice for Apanza, indirectly funded by industry. So these are some of the players that you may or may not have heard about. So here's an example, right? Brain cancer, industry research versus independent research. You're noticing a trend there? On the left-hand side is all the industry research. There's a very, down the bottom, not statistically significant, is a very small risk, right? It's all clustered. The independent research is on the right. Our federal government, so there's some statistics on brain cancer. Our federal government has appointed a major telco to manage the National Cancer Screening Register. A telco. What could possibly go wrong? Wireless devices, like chainsaws, are not toys. They have a use. As Kim said, we're not looking to get rid of everything, but please understand the risk and use them with extreme caution. The government used to promote lots of nasty things. Microwave radiation will be added to this list with your voice. So let's look at the medical side of things. The WHO recognise exposure to radiation as being sufficient for a medical diagnosis. Yes. Remember, we are all exposed. We're not talking harm. You notice I didn't say harm? I said exposure. I just want to repeat that. We are all being exposed. Okay, so just the fact that I'm standing in range of a cell tower means I'm being exposed. A billable code and a medical classification means a recognised medical condition, not some phantom condition made up in one's head, as Asabar and Apanza might have us believe. A report from your doctor is a powerful legal instrument. Let's look at assault. Criminal law provides for assault or threat of assault, or being a party to assault with a pollutant. Electromagnetic radiation is a pollutant. It's a poison. That's in legislation, okay? A doctor's advice that you have been harmed or at risk or fear of harm is evidence. Government ministers, councillors, executives, consultants, past and present, and landholders. A trick of the telcos is to get a landholder to sign up to put the tower on their land. What they don't realise is that the minute they do that, they're liable legally for harm. They're not immune from criminal law, okay, and may face personal liability. If you want more information on this, then you can see Raymond Broomhall's talk on the ECSFR website. He speaks for a few hours on the issue of assault. And we are all very honoured to call Ray a friend to us. This man has a heart of gold. I can't speak high enough of him. If your doctor reports that you have been damaged or have suffered loss from the poison exposure, e.g. you may have had to give up a job to homeschool, or you may have had to shield your home from a tower, perhaps financial compensation is due. So doctors are pretty important in the proof of harm argument, especially integrated doctors who understand EMR poisoning. But, you guessed it, they are now under attack. This is urgent, folks. The Medical Board of Australia, if they push this through, integrated doctors could lose their licence to practice. That's my understanding. There are forms at the back of this podium which we'd really encourage you to get a hold of with information. Please make a submission opposing this change. And now the fun stuff. Unpacking the Panzer, our radiation health regulator. Right. We're back to the 2001 Senate inquiry. Senate inquiries have no teeth, but here is proof of government knowledge of risk. They knew it, but they did it anyway. Injury lawyers, please take note, 18 years of harm. ICNIRP, top of the tree, international body that everyone else in the world say we adopt their standards. Well, they're not actually standards, they're guidelines, so they adopt their guidelines. ICNIRP, or essentially the wireless industry, created the guideline that Apanza has adopted as the so-called standard against the recommendation of the 2001 Senate inquiry. Interesting, read that inquiry. You might see, all through it, Dr. Bruce Hocking, former Chief Medical Officer of Telstra, talks about cancer clusters in children around towers. The next line, Apanza don't agree. Boom, 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 all the way through it. Now, so here we go. On the right-hand side, the rest of the world is on the left. On the right-hand side is the ICNIRP requirement, okay? And that's where Australia is, it's where America is, it's where others are. Let's look at where that sits with Wi-Fi at school. Our exposure limit is well into the risk of leakage of the blood-brain barrier. This can be fatal. You see that red line? 10,000 microwatts per metre squared. That is the limit of our current standard, guideline, whatever. Now look at Wi-Fi. Look at the effects. Headaches, concentration problems, negative impact on memory and attention, behavioural changes. How do these side effects of being dosed with poison at school possibly support a good learning environment? And this is what Apanza are legally obliged to do. It's in the Act. So what regulatory instrument do they use to protect our health and our environment. They use an arbitrary, out-of-date standard. Well, guideline. It's not a standard. A foundation argument of a panzer is that levels are well below the standard. Okay, there are two things that a panzer say over and over again. Their mantra: there is no evidence of harm, it's well below the standard. What standard? It doesn't exist. This assumes, the panzer statement, that the standard is correct and current. The standard must address dosage, it does not. Standards must address the sum of all radiation exposures, the cumulative effect. You know, think of a classroom with Wi-Fi upstairs, downstairs, next door, full of cell phones that are turned on, with laptops, with printers, and the cell tower across the road, right? The cumulative effect. So why not update the standard? Who does that serve? Is the panzer failing in their duty of care? Cool. Well, here, let's look at what the Australian National Audit Office has said. In 2005, so there's an extract from the report of an audit of the panzer. Clearly in 2005, the panzer was not managing conflict of interest. And by 2013, they still have not. This is a health regulator advising all, including the Department of Education, impacting our children's health and future, about the safety. Yet, their overall performance is repeatedly brought into question over the managing of conflicts of interest. How can a regulatory failure that could impact the nation's health span at least a decade? A panzer's advice impacts us all. Remember a panzer's legal obligation? To protect health. Going to get worse? Giving advice to medical doctors. It's not cool. What advice is Australia's Chief Medical Officer giving a panzer? And what knowledge of risk of harm does he have? It's our understanding that as a doctor, Australia's Chief Medical Officer is legally bound and perhaps personally liable. Additionally, in his role as a doctor and Chief Medical Officer, it's our understanding that it is legally duty-bound to investigate any risk of harm. I mentioned risk of harm earlier. We've known about that since 2001. And that's to the health of the population, the risk of harm. Silence is loud. Oh, and yes, there's more. No evidence of harm. The panzer have not employed anyone qualified in medicine or medical sciences to review the scientific literature. Now, you can read through the people that were involved in the panzer analysis of all the literature from this report, okay, that was published in 2014. There's no one qualified. Based on this highly questionable review, the panzer conclude there is no evidence of harm. Seriously. And now we get to the disclaimer. So we have a health regulator not intending to prevent any disease, right? But by law, they're actually required to protect the health. Is the health and safety of our population, our planet, built upon an illusion? We have a standard that is actually not a standard in nature, but only in title. Managed by a government agency, legally bound to protect health, whose advice is not to be relied upon. The illusion is that compliance with the standard that doesn't exist will ensure safety and prevent disease. So what does this mean for the New South Wales Department of Education? According to a panzer, their standard and their advice cannot be relied upon. They say it, okay, it's on their website. So if DEET cannot prove, the Department of Education cannot prove that they were misled by a panzer, the onus is entirely on the Department of Education to ensure they obtained medical advice that Wi-Fi presented no risk of harm to children before they installed it. Did they? ECSFR has also sent a letter of further particulars to the department. That's on our website, and the original one is on our website. And the department's interim response, where they acknowledge their legal responsibility, is on our website. This letter points out an extract from the product safety manual of the Wi-Fi used in New South Wales schools. Note the underline. Must not be co-located or operating in conjunction with any other antenna or transmitter. Guess what, folks? Smartphones, laptops, iPads, printers, and the Wi-Fi router in all the adjoining classrooms are transmitters. It appears that since the current Wi-Fi units have been installed, however long ago that was, the children in New South Wales public schools have been exposed to a radiation dosage that even exceeds the questionable ICNIR-APANSA guidelines. But APANSA, don't worry, APANSA recently did a test in schools and deemed the radiation levels to be safe. If you read the fine print, in 20 of the 23 classrooms they looked at, they were empty. They were void, everything was turned off. There weren't a bunch of kids sitting there using laptops, talking, with their smartphones, etc. To harm children for profit, or because it is difficult or expensive to do otherwise, is wrong. This is about morality and a basic right to health. Australia is not a fascist state yet. Let's keep it that way. We should not be experimenting on our children. All over the world, parents, scientists and medical doctors have been pleading with politicians, regulators and industry to protect their children. They do not. They will not even their own children. Collectively, we will make a change. The time to act is now. So, what are we doing about it? What next? Well, at ECSFR, we're funding a war chest. We have a legal, scientific and medical team already. One of the things that we'll be pursuing is the Department of Education with the initial funds. We wish to purchase a radiation meter to gather evidence for court and ultimately reset the standard, and that affects everything, and put the brakes on 5G. On the left is the meter that we're seeking to purchase. There's only 3 of them in the country that we're aware of. 2 are owned by APANSA and 1 by ASABA. ECSFR is a legal registered charity. We would very much like to turn a ripple in the pond in Mullumbimby into a national wave of change. So if you can, please do help us how you can. Tell your friends, tell your colleagues, tell your children. Look, everything and anything helps. We're on our website. We have the bank information, and everything you contribute makes a difference. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you.
Wow, how lucky are we to have someone of that calibre living in the Shire, and thank you so much, Sue. That was so informative. We're not being overwhelmed by science here, guys. This is fact, and this is, hopefully this is really making an impact. So we're going to open it to questions now. I invite you all to forward whatever question you have to Steve. We have Joe in the middle with the scarf. Joe's walking around with the microphone. So just put your hand up if you have a question now that you'd like to answer.
What do you know about the military's involvement with
That's a loaded question. Literally. There is a body of evidence out there, including declassified military and CIA documents, that this has been experimented for use as a weapon for quite a while. That's my understanding. It is currently used as a crowd control device, and if you do your research, you can certainly find that. Intelligence agencies such as the director of the CIA have recently very publicly said they're looking forward to 5G coming because it will enable them to basically have everyone under surveillance. All right, so we need to be careful not to subscribe to conspiracy theories. You know, this is about economics, it's about governments being in control and keeping control. But yes, there is that concern, absolutely.
I've been told I've been told by a doctor and someone else who is some authority speak on that it wasn't going to be from satellites, and also even if it was, it wouldn't be effective unless you actually had a small receiver box near you. It didn't seem to make sense to me, and I've certainly seen other information that there are satellites. Yeah, your comments, please.
I think it was Elon Musk's company recently was approved to launch SpaceX, yeah, something like 10,000 5G satellites.
20,000.
20,000, there you go, 20,000 5G satellites, 5 megawatts each. Less? 4,000, okay. So essentially, yeah, if you don't have one on your street corner, you know, it's about blanketing the entire planet from space. There will be nowhere to go. Okay.
Hi Steve, I think it'd help everyone if you could paint a picture of what 5G would look like if it does get rolled out worldwide. Besides the image, I think the artificial intelligence of this technology also needs to be addressed.
Yeah. Look, again, publicly available information. One of Elon Musk did a fundraising, and he raised about $100 million in capital to develop a microchip that implants into people's brains to interface with the 5G network. The director of the Federal Communications Commission, or the formal director, made it very clear that everything from your pill bottle to you know, your clothes, etc., will be tracked and monitored. So what 5G will look like, potentially, there's a physical issue with boxes everywhere, all right? So it's just ugly. I mean, there's that aspect. But there's also the issue that all devices will be microwave enabled. You know, we come back to the cumulative effect, your fridge, your toaster, your pill bottles. The supermarket will know when you've taken the milk out the fridge, and the dairy will know, what product you use, and so on and so forth. It's all about keeping you under constant surveillance so that you can be sold more. There's one aspect which is very commercial. There's also the other military or intelligence aspect, which is just simply keeping you under surveillance. And George Orwell was 1984, for those of you who have read it. He might have been a couple of decades off, or maybe 40 years off, but he wasn't far off. I'm not sure if that is sufficient, but yeah, it's scary stuff. It's scary stuff.
Actually, is civil disobedience counterproductive in this mission?
Yeah, well, one of the philosophies of ECSFR, and I can only speak for myself and our group, is that the only way to beat the system is to use the system. Okay, and that means using the law, staying professional, being respectful, as hard as that is. For most of them, it's business. For us, it's personal. Okay, so there's a fine line, and it's hard sometimes to step back and go, it's just about business when you're sending your kid off to be microwaved for another day at school. Okay, but no. The short answer is no. It's definitely not civil disobedience. This is why we're engaging barristers. We have barristers involved. We have people who are former politicians who also have a legal background involved. There's quite a strong team that is, in some cases, overt, like Raymond Broomhall, but covert as well, because we have to be very careful about how we go about this. But we are going to go about it professionally. And in order to do that, that's why we need this crowd fund. You know, there are expenses involved with starting a class action such as advertising in newspapers, engaging barristers, even if they're prepared to heavily discount their fees, etc. You know, there's consultants, professionals. It's the only way. We are the people that are going up against the world's biggest industry, the telecommunications industry. Now, if you look at that and you say, well, if people get sick, then the pharmaceutical industry benefits, you know, the tech companies benefit. It's not just about tech, it's like there's this umbrella of power and we're just slowly being crushed underneath it. And we have to push back up. While the law still allows us to do that. You know, e.g. the change to the doctors. You know, this is just, it's happening.
I wanted to ask about those crystals like ormonite, rocks and things that they're putting the mud leaf powers and things and supposed to absorb and protect. Have you got any science around that?
I personally have not read, there may be some quantum physics and things like that involved, but I personally have not read anything that would suggest that they're actually effective. I can't comment on any particular products. However, I would encourage research to be undertaken into them. I would certainly encourage you know, scientists and the doctors to undertake research to see, because maybe there are quantum physics, quantum biological methods and things like that out there that energetically have some use. But the thing is, if you buy a device that purports to protect you from radiation and your phone still rings, I mean, hello, it's still getting the energy, right? And if it's communicating with the tower, it's not blocking anything.
Oh, hi, I just wanted to know, you're heading for Byron Council. What do people do in the other shires around? What can we do?
Exactly the same thing. Exactly the same thing. You need to all address, as has been done by this wonderful group, you need to all address your council. You need to educate. Education is the key. People will not take action until and unless they are educated and they are aware. That is critical. So, educate the council. I mean, there's a group of councils in Victoria, I believe that they collectively have passed some resolution on this issue. But yes, the first step is education.
G'day Steve, g'day everyone. Hey, I live up on Mount Nardi, next to the World Heritage Area, and since the introduction of 3 and 4G, we've seen the disappearance of nearly 90% of all wildlife in the World Heritage Area. But I'm just wondering, in the future, is there a possibility that we can prevent this from happening below the World Heritage Area and relax the national parks, having this technology installed in them?
Well, our dear friend, the barrister Ray Broomhall, has advised us there's no reason towers can't come down. Okay, that's the first thing. And if the precautionary principle were applied to Mount Nardi, it should never have gone up in the first place. And so there's probably a legal, you know, it's a question for Ray, but there most likely is a legal avenue to prevent. What we've seen before is risk of harm, okay? Risk of harm to wildlife, and that's what you're talking about there. And the precautionary principle says that where there is risk of harm, even if that harm isn't proven, you have to take pretty well all reasonable measures to prevent that harm from occurring. Okay, and the first sensible and logical thing is don't put it in a national park, don't put it in a World Heritage Area. So I believe there's hope there, Mark. Yes, yeah.
Hi Steve. I've just got a question as a parent who has kids who go to school. What do you recommend us parents who are concerned about putting our kids in school every day under the Wi-Fi? What do we do as parents? Do we just keep sending our kids, or do we talk to the principals, or what sort of steps can we take as individual parents?
That's a good question. Yeah, look, I know of parents that have talked to principals and have basically ridiculed that, you know, made to feel like they've got mental problems and what have you. But essentially bullied, okay? I mean, but sure, I mean, communications is paramount. And education. What is critical is to go and see a doctor who understands this stuff. And Raymond, again, our barrister, sort of goes through the steps in this. But first of all, as a concerned parent, you don't want to, you know, you wouldn't send this kid to school if you knew that, you know, it was being constantly sprayed with DDT. So as a concerned parent, you have every right to protect your child. In fact, you know, the UN agreement on the rights of the child is that a child has a right to safety. Okay, that's fundamental. And the school has a legal obligation to protect that child from harm. So you obtain a doctor's letter, and as I mentioned earlier, you know, that could be constituted if the doctor says, yes, your child has been exposed to radiation and perhaps identifies the symptoms of that exposure. That is an indication of harm or risk of harm. Now, Cancer, in their own advice, say our advice is not to be relied upon, and a medical doctor's evidence takes precedent. Okay, so it's far more powerful than anything Cancer says, at least in the courts. So you get your medical doctor's letter, and then you put the school on legal notice. Now, once the school is aware that they're harming your children, then it's a whole different ballgame legally. And again, this is something that Raymond can, it's on our website, and you could also discuss with Ray. So once they're on notice, they're harming your children in the knowledge that they're doing so. And that constitutes an assault under the criminal code. And that makes them, the principal, or whoever is responsible, perhaps, you know, the entire hierarchy of the Department of Education and the Minister, past and present, personally liable for any harm to your child. One of the things Raymond talks about is you can just get an apprehended violence order, but that's more around if you're being assaulted with a tower, okay, against your will, right? Whereas it's you're sending your child to the school. And if there are no schools in the area that don't have Wi-Fi, you don't have a choice. Now, another international agreement with children is a child's right to education. So if the school is telling you, oh, just take the kid out of school, and some parents have suggested that they feel like they've been bullied, so they do take their parents out of school, so the problem goes away. But if there's nowhere else for you to educate the child, then they've lost that right to education. They're arguably even being discriminated against. Okay, so I know one parent that is in discussions with the Discrimination Commissioner on this particular issue, because the child has a right to education. So there are many things you can do, but fundamentally, step one, go see a doctor. You know, I mean, talk to your principal, talk to the PMC, see if you can get some common sense. That's step one, really. Step two, go see a doctor. Step three, Raymond and others, there's some templates I think on our website, there will be for a warning notice, put the Department of Education on notice that they're harming your child. If they're not giving you options or they're not accommodating your child, then the next step is probably the court. But again, you and me and the people in this room don't have the money to take on the entire machine. So this is why it's most likely going to take the form of a class action where we collectively take on the entire machine. And a doctor's letter can be issued for a class of people, right? So we could have a doctor issue a letter for all children. And one of the things we want to do with our fundraise is to reach out to these barristers to write a legal advice that can be taken to the Department of Education. And we're going to go with that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sue. Hopefully we'll have time at the end. You can ask more questions of Sue. But just in the interest of sticking to the schedule and getting through the entire panel, we're going to move on now to Tashi Lamo. She's the admin of Stop 5G Northern Rivers.
Thank you. Wow. Yeah, that was powerful, confronting, but necessary. Yeah, thanks, Steve. So, good afternoon, everyone. It's a real honour, actually, for me to join here with our expert panel. And I also want to express my deep gratitude to all of the community. all the community members that have gathered here today also, just thank you. So, following on from Steve, it makes me all the more aware that I'm not an expert on the issues of electromagnetic radiation. But what I do know is my own experience and my own journey of being electromagnetic sensitive. So I know that I have to diligently mitigate the risks of EMF for myself and family in relation to EMR exposure from devices in the home, such as phones, modems, smart appliances. But what I hadn't factored was the increasing exposure to radiation from EMF pollutants and the accumulation we are steadily being exposed to that was clearly outlined by Steve in the presentation. So I only sat on the fringe of 5G for about a week when it came into my vortex 2 months ago. Yeah, that one rolled out just a few days after the federal election. I think we all got a bit distracted. So understanding and researching 5G was the huge wake-up and shake-up that was needed, necessary, and also what I was calling in. So the time for apathy, selfishness, and ignorance is over. As a group, I feel confident to say that we see 5G as one of the top 3 issues of today, up there with mass extinction and climate change. So it is clear that the authorities who are there to represent us are failing in their duty of care. They are not representing our interests. So for us, the people, being neutral is no longer an option. We need to step up and lean into action. So because the reality is 5G will not just affect the people who oppose it, it will affect all of us. So let us speak out, not just for ourselves, but for those who have no voice, our beautiful nature and wildlife, and of course our children. So how have we as a Stop 5G group got this far in 2 months? It's been through communication, connection, education, and strategic planning. We've had to take matters into our own hands. We've had to align with other awake groups and individuals using the very technology that is making us sick. We've had to address this local, national, and global issue. The platform of Facebook and the internet in general has been instrumental in connecting the 5G communities worldwide and other action groups online. As of today, we have 1,952 members on the Stop 5G Northern Rivers New South Wales group. Yeah, and I just want to add that that's a closed group as well, because we really want to focus on action and not get distracted by what's going on there to confuse us. So the real power here is the people though, and community coming together. So 2 months ago we started with an action group of 8 people. 10 days later, 70 people at an action meeting. 2 weeks later, 40 people at a meeting. And 2 days later, 300 to 400 people rallying at the Byron Shire Council. 2 weeks later, a presentation to council. And now 2 days later, right here, right now, a Q&A with probably around 200 people. And here we are, being live streamed on the internet for our global neighbours as well. So we've literally, I'm going to say it again, we've had to take matters into our own hands. We've distributed 15,000 information flyers across the Northern Rivers region. Being aware to the reality of 5G technology and its capacity to change our future incurs a responsibility to act. So it's a very delicate balance right now of educating the masses who aren't aware of 5G and encouraging action from those who are. So now that we are educated, our personal responsibility is not just about sharing content. It's about how do we use our time most effectively, efficiently, and impactfully. It's about group cohesion and strategic calls to action. We can't unknow what we now know. So my question to all of you is, what are you personally going to do now? Thank you. If there's any questions?
So I'm from Ballina and I'm passionate about my children. I have two autistic children, one with an autoimmune disease, another one who's struggles with school. And would you encourage people in your council to get together stuff, or is there packages we can get online that would assist us in that further so that we look educated and so that we've got information?
Yeah, awesome question. It's essential that you get together with people in your community in the Ballina Shire and address them directly. We're in the process of putting together a community awareness pack that will be distributed nationally, and in that will be templates that you can draw from, and we're also going to put together a bit of a timeline of sequencing and what we've addressed as working or not working. I'll forward that information to you, probably have that together in the next week.
I don't know my questions directly asking you. I'm asking anyone in the room who knows, but as Steve has indicated, the process of going to a doctor and getting your illness is recognised as powerful and potent. Does anybody know any doctor in the Northern Rivers, and could those doctors, if there is any doctor or other doctors, somehow that information has to be given to the people, because I don't know any doctors. I've been to doctors and tried to give them information and they've just refused to receive it. So that is the vital missing link for us in the Northern Rivers right now. Available doctors who understand.
Yeah, I'll pass it on, but I'll just briefly speak from my own personal experience. Trying to get a doctor to join us on the panel today proved very difficult, but I must also note that there's a lot of very sympathetic doctors that are very, very concerned, but they also feel somewhat pressured is a very light word, not safe to perhaps bring their name to this cause at this point in time.
Thanks, Tashi. My understanding too is what is useful is not trying to have a doctor diagnose that you've got specific effects, but getting a doctor to say that it is not safe, or is it safe? Is that correct, Steve? So you might like to...
The doctor's letter essentially needs to identify and correct that it is not safe, outline what symptoms that you're exhibiting as a way of demonstrating that you are actually impacted by electromagnetic radiation, and recommend how to mitigate those symptoms. So in the case of a child, the doctor might say itchy eyes, headaches, Wi-Fi at school, and remove the child from the Wi-Fi situation, right? So that, all of that. ECSFR's website, we do have some, I think, template letters or advice for doctors. We're in the process of putting doctors up who have written letters, but the medical organisation has recently issued an edict where if a doctor doesn't follow consensus and consensus is undefined, they can lose their license to practice as a doctor. So this has made all doctors very, very nervous about this issue. Consensus is, it's like, you know, I had one doctor say to me, it's a kangaroo court, and Tashi's absolutely right, they are quite concerned to do this. If it goes to court, you do need an expert witness, and an expert witness is probably a paediatrician. No paediatrician at this stage will speak out. There are some integrative doctors who have been recognised by the courts as an expert witness. There aren't many. But the first step is to put the department, or whoever it is, the telco, on notice with that doctor's letter, because a medical practitioner holds far more weight than a PANZA. Yeah. And sorry, final thing, I think the ECSFR, as I mentioned, we are getting together a list of doctors who have written letters, yeah? We're trying, yeah.
Terrific. Thank you, Tashi. So, well done, awesome. Okay, we're moving on. Thank you so much. So, we have Bo now. Bo, would you like to introduce you? Bo is a telecommunications technician, NBN contractor, and installer of the optics, etc. So.
Thank you. Hey everybody, it's really nice to see so much care in this room. Everybody caring about the health and well-being of not only ourselves and our loved ones, but the world around us, nature and animals. So, who am I? I'm a technician. I run a small business here in Mullumbimby, and I have been contracting to the National Broadband Network and the Department of Education and various other schemes for the rollout of this sort of technology. So my own personal experience has been with government schemes, telco contracts, and the implementation of large rollouts of technology. So, what I've seen out there is that everything is geared to the lowest dollar or time is money. Standards like ARPANZA, which is questionable in the first place, are often overlooked or not even understood in the first place. I've personally audited schools for their data and Wi-Fi systems. What I've seen in these schools is Wi-Fi routers directly installed underneath children's desks, lower than 2 meters on walls, on teachers' desks right next to where they work. I've personally gone through, photographically documented this. The purpose of it wasn't actually to find out whether the Wi-Fi was compliant. It was actually to audit and document the networks as they were in each school, so that the assets could be understood and known. So, myself being interested in health, interested in the effects of technology on the subtle bodies and energetic systems and that sort of thing, I was shocked to see all of this. But it wasn't, unfortunately, my place to actually do anything about it. So I documented it and took note of it for myself. So on these contracts, I've also been through the specific safety training for each of the technologies as they roll out. So I built satellite uplinks for the National Broadband Network, where we install microwave beams that fire up to the satellite and receive back from it. And so I've seen how ARPANZA's standards have been filtered down through and implemented into OH&S policy for the installation and rollout of technology. And I've also got to witness on the ground what that actually looks like. So what a technician will do with that information based on the fact that they are there to do the job as quick as possible, get a result, and move on to the next one. It's it's disappointing that the safety and the standard are not the paramount thing here because of the limitations of time and money. So when I hear things like the rollout of 5G will be consistent with the Arkansas standard, which we know is questionable, I'm also aware that that standard itself is quite likely not to be adhered to. So, for example, I've seen installations of Wi-Fi routers into completely metal mountable buildings. So when you get a high-power Wi-Fi router that is basically contained, none of that energy can disperse in the usual fashion. It is reflected around and basically kept in. So exposure levels go up. So from a technical perspective, every Wi-Fi router or every transmitting device, when it's installed into a specific environment with the specific materials around it, it's no longer going to perform the same as it does in its initial testing phases. This puts a huge amount of responsibility onto the technician, and in fact, in the small print for products like commercial Wi-Fi, commercial microwave beams, you have to read through and acknowledge the agreement, the user agreement, that you are a professional, qualified technician who understands all of this technology that they're installing and how to keep it to the standard, essentially. We've all gone through that initial page of a user agreement, bzz, click, okay, agree, move on. So when we look at the rollout of 5G, with the experience of the rollout of, say, fixed wireless, satellite technology, or any of these other schemes, we see that it's ultimately up to the installer and the end user, or the people in the vicinity, to be self-educated enough to actually understand what's happening, what they're doing, what the environment around them, and as Steve pointed out, all the other transmitters in the area. So to go in and do a test in an empty room when it's normally full with laptops and iPads, etc. So all of that needs to be understood, even just to install it and keep it within this standard. So what I've seen with these rollouts is the emphasis on speed, getting it done, kicking goals, making it happen within the time frame, and moving on. So what is different with 5G? Well, 5G, for a start, is going to have a lot more devices. It's a model based on a high number of devices, all distributing the signal. And so if we have a huge amount of these things to put out there, we're talking about a massive scheme, a massive rollout, a lot of technicians, a huge margin for error, essentially. And based on the pace, or the predicted pace of this rollout, we're looking at massive, massive amount of devices happening in a very short period of time. My own experiences with the National Broadband Network was that the faster a technician went, the less he was able to take in the environment, take in the implications of what they were doing. So I have concerns about the pace. The long-range plan for 5G is to have many devices. Probably the most alarming for myself is the satellite side of that, because we talk about thousands of radiating devices in the sky, essentially. So these satellite dishes are very different from the satellites themselves are very different from the satellites we've been working with for previous NBN, or say Foxtel, or the various other mobile satellite phone providers, because those satellites orbit at 26,000 kilometres up in the sky. That's a very far distance for the signal to come to reach Earth. And so typically, with a distance like that, you need a very big dish to collect enough of it, focus it into a point, so that it's usable by the end device. But the difference with 5G is that we're actually looking at satellites that are going to be orbiting at around 7,000 kilometres compared to 26. So that we can actually, and this was a question that somebody asked before, are the satellites going to be connecting with a device that then re-radiates it? And that is part of the 5G technology. But they're also speaking of direct to end-user device signal as well. So what will 5G look like? Somebody else asked this, and from a technical infrastructure point of view, it's going to be a massive mix-mash of different technologies. In the initial rollout, which has already begun, essentially we have mobile phone towers, which are almost identical to what we're already seeing with 4G and 3G, and they will simply put out another frequency. The 5G frequency at the moment for Australia is going to be around 3.6 gigahertz. It's not that much higher than what has already been in place for 4G. However, towards the end of this year, or depending on which reports actually come through, or predictions, later this year or next year, they're hoping to be broadcasting 5G a lot higher up in what they call the KA band, which is around 26 or 28 gigahertz. That's a lot higher frequency. And the implications of that, essentially, is not very well known. It's only been used in radar and various other very specialised and isolated technologies. But we're looking at receiving that from satellites and mobile phones as well. So just before I wrap up, I would love to, so we're going to have lots of little base stations around, and we're going to have all the satellite technology, and the satellite technology is going to mesh and help feed information to the on-ground stuff and direct to device. So we're talking about just a massive proliferation, essentially. So why do we want it? There's a massive amount of change that this will bring about. They're talking about cars that are fully automated. We heard microchips, we heard the Internet of Things, which is every device connecting. We have to decide whether we want this. We can also vote with our own wallets. What do we wish to purchase? And what implication does that really have on our life in terms of the quality of our life and the risks that it poses? So, I think that from my perspective, we have to decide how far we're willing to go. Is what we've got really not enough? I actually feel more concerned about how it will be used, even more than the actual exposure in terms of such a broad network. But look, I just want to leave you with something very quickly. So this is kind of a to-do list. What I would recommend to everybody is, first of all, the biggest exposure risk for everybody in this room really is their own device, their phone. The phone is designed to go the furthest distance to the tower, whereas Wi-Fi and Bluetooth are very small range. So when I'm home and the Wi-Fi, I actually turn my phone into in-flight mode. The Wi-Fi still works in that mode, and you can connect to your Wi-Fi router. That is a lower signal than your mobile phone. Move the routers away from beds and turn it off when you're not using it. You can log into it and stipulate the output to be lower. So look at that up on Google. We don't have time for that, unfortunately. Also, I would like to say that while there are some amazing efforts to slow this down and stop Wi-Fi, 5G, there is so much of it's going to be satellite and in space, and so much of it's going to be around, and if it stops in this area, when we travel, we're going to be exposed to it. I would love to leave you guys with something, even though it's important to feel the importance of what is happening. Our attitudes are also incredibly important. So to be acting out of our deep care for life and our deep care for the ones we love and for the environment, versus acting out of fear. Fear itself is the greatest lubricant to oppression, or a system of oppression. And so cancer can also be caused by worry, by stress, and we can't also overlook the massive placebo effect. Okay, this is really valid, and this is not to say that that what somebody feels or hypersensitivity is that at all, but it has to be weighed up in there. So stop and check in with yourself. What are you feeling about it? Do something, do whatever you feel is right for you about it. Don't wait for anybody else's standards or anything else like that, or to tell you that it's okay. Do what you feel is right. And if you can't do anything about it, just remember the frequency and the vibration that you yourself are emanating, because that has a massive effect on ourselves as well. So stop, check in, do what you can, and try not to let fear overrun this great movement.
Okay, I've got a question over here. Is that all right?
Yes, so we'll take 5 minutes first, Kelly, with Bo. Some questions for Bo.
So can I clarify that there is a way to go into our Wi-Fi machines and actually turn down the frequency? And we just Google, like, what would you put into Google?
Yes, you can. So everybody's Wi-Fi router has a little web page that is hosted inside the Wi-Fi router. You can access that by typing in the web address of that Wi-Fi router. To look it up, if you were to connect with to your Wi-Fi and then go into the information in the settings of your phone and look at the IP address that the Wi-Fi router has given you, the IP address of your phone, and then below that will say the IP address of the router. A common one is 192.168.1.1. Or if it's Telstra, a common one is 10.0.0.138. They're all really specific, but it will tell you the information and the settings in your phone if you're connected to it. If you type in that address, it will bring up a little web page. That web page usually has a default login, which is published on the bottom of the router itself. It might be admin, the username and admin for the login. You then need to go to the wireless settings in there, and then find the output power. And the output power on the domestic one generally has high, medium and low. They don't all have it, unfortunately, but you could shop around and find one that does. The commercial systems that I have experience installing, they have, you can set it discreetly, so you can set it to whatever output you want. Yep. For sure. Yep.
Thank you so much. Is there somebody, like for idiots like me who don't understand, I've been told about hardwire, the thing, I have no idea what they're talking about. Are there technicians in the area who people like myself can say, can you come to my place and sort this out for me?
Yes, I personally am a technician in the area who can do that, yes. Yep, okay, I'll put that on the website too. Yeah. I wasn't going to make a play for an advertisement today. But yeah, I do fibre optics and data cabling. So if anyone wants to hardwire it up to 90 metres with a cable, or longer than that, you can use fibre optics, which is...
Okay, another question over here. Sorry, I've got the mic.
Yes.
Patiently waiting.
Yes.
Hello. Would you recommend any shielding devices? I know it was touched on before, but is there any?
That's a great question. Obviously, the person right next to you would probably be better at answering that.
My question's just been asked really. I was just going to see if it could be possible for you to put some links on the Facebook site to help us navigate to these places.
Sorry?
If you could just put some links in on the Facebook site.
Okay, sure. Yes.
Help us navigate to
yes, yeah. Sure. And with regards to shielding, metals are good shields. So if essentially a metal blocks and reflects Wi-Fi. So with the satellite signals, a vast amount of that will be reflected off a satellite, off a tin roof, for example. But Anand probably can speak to shielding better.
Yeah, hey there. I've just had an interesting experience. I've been going out with meters into people's houses, families with pregnant women, babies, young children, who are really conscious of having their Wi-Fi up. I've now gone to 4 homes in the last 2 weeks. Wi-Fi is turned off, full power transmission Wi-Fi signal. They believed that they had their Wi-Fi off. I went, 192, I went to the site, it was kicked off. It's transmitting full power.
I have some explanations for that. Yes, yep. So in particular, Telstra routers, they have, they actually, even when you turn it off, it actually just turns off the specific network name of your private network. But Telstra, as part of their scheme for creating the biggest Wi-Fi network across Australia, is that they actually will use your Wi-Fi router to create a hotspot that is publicly available. And that will come up saying Telstra or FON, F-O-N, Wi-Fi. So your Wi-Fi router is still on in that case. It's actually so that people walking down the street can go from hotspot to hotspot to hotspot on the Telstra network. So I hear that there is a way to do that as well. I'm going to fire one of those routers up and post how to get around that on the website as well. But yeah, that's why it's happening. Yep.
So you mean even though I turn off my Wi-Fi router at night and my phone is disconnected?
No, this is not if you physically switch it off. If it's physically switched off, it's off.
I've had Ethernet cable put in.
Yes.
I've gone and connected Ethernet cables to 4 other computers in the house. I share a house.
Yep.
And at night I just see everybody's light off and I turn it off. That means I have no phone either, but I don't care about that.
Yes.
So I live in this steel frame house.
Yep. She's saying if the Wi-Fi router itself is turned off, is it off? Yes, it is. So if there's no power to the device, it can't output Wi-Fi. Yep. That's the surefire way to get it off. But we're talking about leaving the router on and turning just the wireless transmission off so that anything that is physically cabled to the device can still operate.
Okay, I've got a question over here.
I'll be really quick. I've got a flip phone now, and I'm just wondering if there's much difference between having a smartphone and a flip phone. If you could elucidate on that a bit.
It would probably depend on the specific phone's output. So every phone has different signal strength output. Yep. But if the best, you just have to borrow a meter or something like that and find out what the signal output is. But yeah, the best. That's the short answer. I think that's the wrap up. Yeah. Thanks everybody.
Thank you so much, guys. So rest assured, folks, thank you. available to us all. Please rest assured that we will be creating links. This is all the more reason to make sure you get on the Stop 5G Northern Rivers Facebook page, because that's where we'll place all this information. Bo will provide links to this, and we'll get Bo to draft something up that you can all follow, so you can minimise the risk within your own homes, and you can pass that on to your loved ones as well. Thank you so much, Bo. That was amazing. So now we have Kelly. Kelly Leven is the president of the Australasian Society of Building Biologists. She's an environmental health consultant, and she speaks mainly focusing on wellness principles in the home, schools and workplace. So quite in tangent with what we just heard on a technical perspective. And we're going to see a quick PowerPoint presentation and then questions again. Sorry, Kel. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Firstly, a big thank you to everyone for their positive thoughts and actions throughout this very important human rights campaign. Just over 1 week ago, I heard one of the biggest breakthroughs in relation to the issues with wireless radiation and the effects on human and environmental health. Hearing a government official from Arkansas admit that they can't guarantee the safety of long-term exposure to wireless radiation and that they are not in the business of making 100% guarantees, should be enough to invoke the precautionary principle as a matter of urgency. Especially for our most vulnerable, our children, the elderly, the sensitive and the sick. I invite you to take a moment to think about, over the last couple of weeks, with so much information online, how you have been feeling with spending time on your phone. Do you get headaches, heart palpitations, aches in the body, feel anxious, feel depressed, ringing in the ears, jaw pain, prickly skin, insomnia? There's so many different things that these fit devices can make us feel. So I am a building biologist. I've completed an advanced diploma through the Australian College of Environmental Studies. Some people may know of Nicole Bilsma, who started our industry. She's absolutely amazing. She started the college in 1999. So she's been talking about this for a very long time. One of the things we study is electrobiology, and that's the study of electromagnetic fields and their impact on human health. So out on the field in the past years, I have been way too busy with too many people being sick inside their homes, and electromagnetic fields have been one of the biggest sources for that, along with mould, and we feel that they're correlated somewhere along the way when more science comes out about that. Basically, when we come out, we're looking at all environmental triggers, any environmental health hazards within the home. We spend 90% of our time indoors, and we spend lots of times with different people, so I'm very happy to hear there's somebody here that can do wired connections for people in their homes. I've recently moved from Sydney, and there weren't a lot of electricians actually that could actually really get that job done well, so we're very lucky. It really is time to act. In the past 35 years, new cancer diagnoses in Australia have almost tripled. Allergic and respiratory diseases are rising, and children, the health of the children is declining. 1 in 4 have mental health conditions, 1 in 3 have allergies, 1 in 4 with asthma, and 1 in 63 have autism. 7% of children worldwide are diagnosed with ADHD, and 1 in 5 adults have a serious chronic illness. The pandemic of childhood neurodevelopmental disorders is happening right now. It is actually in a schoolyard hard to see a child that is completely mentally and physically healthy. 1 in every 35 Australian children in the 5 to 14-year-old age group are diagnosed with cancer. We are seeing a correlation, and we can't ignore it. We have been going on about this for a very long time now, so the awareness that 5G has created is absolutely wonderful. We have to take the positives out of every situation. I think Steve covered most of this. Basically, is that there is international scientific consensus amongst hundreds of independent scientists not closely related to the industry that the current safety guidelines are inadequate. Wireless radiation has been classed as a possible carcinogen and is in the same category as lead and DDT. Our PANSA standards are based on a 6-minute time against the head, a thermal effect against the head in increments on a 100 kilogram soldier. There are no long-term exposure limits at all. The standards are not intended to protect us. These are the sources that you can get radio frequency electromagnetic fields. There's many in the house. Some countries have removed wireless technology from kindergartens and primary schools because of these health issues. I'll go through those because and we have also spoken about the exposure standards where ours are absolutely unbelievably ridiculous. "5G. 5G is the 5th generation in mobile wireless technology that promises low latency, a very high volume of data, messages with minimal delay, faster network speed and improved connectivity. High-frequency millimetre wave radiation was developed in World War II by the military as a weapon in crowd control. This technology is very, very different from the natural radiation that we have evolved on. The 5G rollout involves millions of low-powered mobile base stations, small cell antennas, every 50 to 200 metres in high-density areas, and 20,000 satellites in the Earth's atmosphere. 5G proposes to bring 3G, 4G Wi-Fi closer to people through millions of small cell antenna arrays. This is a big issue. This is an issue on the basis that the health effects of chronic exposure to all cellular voice and data transmission at any frequency and any generation are known to be harmful to all life, cumulatively over time and at close range. The National Toxicology Program concluded late last year, which our standards really, well, they're not standards, but they really should be changed to probable carcinogen. After a $30 million study over more than 10 years, that there is clear evidence that male rats exposed to high levels of radio frequency radiation, like the radiation used in 2G and 3G cell phones, developed cancerous heart tumours. The 5G network represents the greatest threat to freedom in the history of humanity. It will no longer be an internet of devices, rather an internet of things, including nappies, fridges, hats, watches, milk jugs, floor tiles, self-driving cars containing antennas and microchips collecting data about you and your choices via the ultra-fast 5G network. This will dramatically change the way that we live, and privacy and security will be virtually non-existent. The bandwidth, even though it's stated that it doesn't, equals more radiation and comes at a cost to both human and wildlife health. 5G involves the mandatory irradiation of the public and all life on the planet without any research to verify its safety. Small cells transmit data via direct focused beams of energy specific to an area rather than spread over a larger area like they are now. Each 5G base station will contain hundreds of thousands of antennas aiming multiple laser-like beams simultaneously at all phones and user devices in the service area. Signals from 5G antennas transmitting above 20 gigahertz can only penetrate, and that's later, not now, can only penetrate into homes if beam-forming technology is used. Radio frequency shielding paint and building-grade metal foil can stop the signals,
But it is very important before getting shielding that you know that it's done correctly, because if it's not done correctly, it can make your situation a lot worse. And it's important not to use wireless technology in the home at all in those shielded areas. Very, very important. The radiated power of these beams can be increased. So as we were speaking about before, these the 5G is used as a military weapon for crowd control, the frequencies. The frequencies used for this are about 90 gigahertz. At the moment, they are looking at introducing 5G below 10 gigahertz, but with each generation that is introduced, it will go up higher and higher, up to 60 or more and beyond. And we have no control over this. Radiated power will be aimed at you and everyone using a mobile phone or other device. The signals can pass through one home to get to you. So despite the fact that I'll just tell you. Despite the fact that research has been conducted on health effects on millimetre wave radiation, preliminary observations do show that it increases skin temperature, creates inflammation, oxidative stress, and eye damage. Impact of high-frequency radiation on eye diseases like cataracts has actually been studied thoroughly, and it's well established since the 1960s. There are also concerns for the skin because the skin is acting as an antenna, and this can affect the nervous system and in turn mental health. For insects, if insects are about 1 millimetre in length, if they fly through the wave, they set up resonance and start vibrating at the same frequency as the radiation they are hitting and instantly die. And there's already been a 70% decline in bees already, so the impact on the food chain is virtually unknown. The rollout will also require the removal of hundreds of thousands of trees because they interfere with the signals. Our air quality is already declining. We don't need to get rid of many trees, especially in city areas. There is currently no independently funded research being conducted by the telecommunications industry on the impact of 5G on human health, despite the fact that radio frequency fields used in current technologies and wireless technologies have demonstrated biological effects including suppressing melatonin, DNA strand breaks, and enhancing the permeability of the blood-brain barrier. And the issue with this is, if you're in a toxic home anyway with the chemicals and mould, that can enter straight into your bloodstream. So that's the danger with that. Interactions with humans will be reduced as much as possible, and interaction with machines and gadgets will be our new reality. The government established a 5G working group consisting of industry bodies and key industry players, along with government departments in 2017 to coordinate the implementation of 5G across networks across the country in 2019 and 2020 in order to become the first adopter country. Remarkably, there are no health experts that have been appointed to this working group. Coincidentally, our new Minister for Communication, Cyber Safety and the Arts, Paul Fletcher, is an ex-Optus executive. Talk about conflict of interest. And if anybody is interested in looking into it, if you haven't already, there is a clear history of corrupt science and lies to the public to make us believe that wireless technology is completely safe. And this is where I'll give this book around corporate ties that bind. Don Maish, chapter 16, tells a lot. So if you like reading books, like I love reading books because of the screens, excellent book. Shocking though, so be prepared. Despite the scientific evidence, I was just saying here about our meters as a building biologist. At the moment, our meters will measure up to 12 gigahertz, so depending on the model. And when the super 20 gigahertz range comes, the machines that are a price range for people to afford, they're actually making them now. They don't even have them. So. If you want to look at phone towers in your area as well, this is a great little, they're the two websites that are great to see what phone towers are near you. Despite the scientific evidence, there are no exposure limits protecting us from the long-term exposure that we are getting. Despite the electro-pollution blanketing our buildings, our schools, our homes, there are no standards. It can take years or even decades to understand the effect of this electro-smog exposure from cradle to grave. We must be aware of the systemic failure across multiple industries resulting in significant health issues. People are already suffering from electromagnetic hypersensitivity. They are warning us that there is danger, and it is time for us to listen. Russian Ministry of Defence refused to transmit the operators of the frequencies for 5G. 5G was halted in Brussels, their environment minister stating that the people of Brussels are not guinea pigs whose health I can sell at a profit. It's time to follow their lead and the lead of others outlined, if anybody's interested in having a look. This is the actions of other people around the world. It's time to take those actions. It's time to invoke the precautionary principle as a matter of urgency. This is one of my favourite quotes that I've been having in my, every time I do a workshop for many years, and that's, "A gram of prevention is worth a kilogram of cure." And I'm just so grateful for what Steve's doing with the schools, because I'm one of those parents who, when I finished studying, I went to the school so excited with all the information to get Wi-Fi out of the school and to stop bringing your own device, and yeah, it's really not that easy. 5G is not a done deal. We need to delay or block implementation until independent studies are done. And I really do believe that somewhere inside all of us is the power to change the world. And we can do that right now. I've just got some resources here as well, if anybody's interested in getting those. This is an amazing book by Nicole Bilsma. This is full of scientific research, references, peer-reviewed studies, absolutely full. There's a whole chapter dedicated to EMS and other exposures in the home as well. And Lynn McLean as well, she's been doing great work as well over 20 plus years, and she's got some really simple books. Books are great. And then we've also, somebody asked before, one of the building biologists has done up a system called Pop the Wi-Fi. That's a website you can go into to look for letters and things from the school. Lots of science in that as well. And then just, if you're interested in reading, just come and see me after. Just like to send you to the right place. Try not to get overwhelmed with looking at all the different things, because it just gets too overwhelming and you just put it in too hard path. Thank you.
Thank you, that was very informative, and thanks to all the people that have presented today, I really liked it. As a concerned resident, grandfather and father, I'm really sort of concerned about the rollout of 5G personally. But I'd like everyone to be aware, we all talk about the health aspects of it, which is really important, but I'd really like to look at what drives it as well. And I've been doing some private research and looking at the idea of smart cities and what our government and our governance is signing up to, okay? So can anyone tell me what their thoughts are on that? And do they know whether our local Green Council has in any way, shape, form signed up to that idea in this area?
It's a great question, Ed, and just a shout out to Ed too. See that beautiful longboard at the back of the room? Ed has donated that. USB surfboards. And his silent so often happening around that too. So who would like to address that? This is an issue. The smart cities is something that we're aware of, and we raised it on Thursday. My understanding is it received funding to that effect, and smart cities is reliant on 5G, you're right there. So it's all tied in. It's a huge can of worms, you know, it just goes in all different areas, and we have to just be really onto it and really keep our focus clear and not let them wiggle out of it out the back door. So it's a really pertinent point that Ed raises, and it's definitely something that's on our radar. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything to that. Yeah, so yeah, smart city's all part of it, mate. You're spot on. That's exactly right. Anyone else have a question?
Yes, thank you. Just wondered, does anyone have a time frame that when is 5G likely to be actually transmitting to the northern rivers, and is it in all the capital cities already, or what's the time frame? Thank you.
There's one of the websites that I showed on here has a map of all. It's mainly in the cities at the moment, but it has a map showing all of the locations, and the other one shows the proposed locations as well of towers. There's that. The top used one is 5G towers.
Is there any reason why we just can't have landline and
Oh.
Ethernet cable?
Can I just say from a personal...
Look, I've never owned a mobile phone. I still have landline. And when unknowingly I said to Telstra, oh, okay, what's this NBN about? And he came and some electrician had to go down under the house and rewire the whole thing. And I was feeling prickly and, you know. So I got them to change it. I said, if I want to connect with Ethernet cable, I've got 4 or 5 other computers because I have to share a house, so, and they're all studying. So I got blue Ethernet cables strung around the house and under the carpet, a little connector. And I just tell everybody, look, 11 o'clock at night, it's off. But sometimes when I wake up in the morning, 7:30, oops, 8, I better turn it on. Then they've got I've got my phone, my landline, and they can get onto the internet. But you can still do it with Ethernet cable. We've been lied to. We think we've got to have the latest gizmo.
Yeah,
you know?
It's actually safer to be cabled as well, and quicker. Well, not 5G, but it just doesn't, yeah.
Grey? What's this thing? Look at the grey.
Definitely. It's crazy. And NBN isn't even finished, but they're starting 5G, and it's obviously all done.
Is there any way you can refuse to have it connected?
That's the problem with 5G, really, is it's taking that right away. If you don't live near a mobile phone tower now, you're okay. You can cable your, then again, if you live close to your neighbours, that can come into your house, their Wi-Fi. But that's the problem with the cells, it's 200 metres. They're shielding, you can do shielding as a last resort, but you just read them.
Waste of money.
The thing is with those technologies is that we can't measure. So with shielding, if we measure without the shielding and then the wall gets painted and then we measure that the fields are gone, with other devices we can't measure.
Last question.
I went to the RFM SO site, and yeah, it does have a 5G tower on it, but quite often the 5G is going to have a lot more stations around. You're saying that. Is there any requirement on the authorities to actually put a map of those? Because I'm trying to find a map of where those little pesky boxes are going to be, and at the moment there doesn't seem to be any information about where they're actually going to put them.
Yeah, that's the top used one, is the only 5G towers that I know the map of at the moment.
Because they're just the existing towers?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I haven't.
No?
No.
Do you know how would you find out where they're actually going to put those systems?
Yeah, great question. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is there is also the 4G existing towers will be upgraded. So this is what I mean by very, very stealthy, folks. You know, it's all very murky, and they're sliding it in. They're sliding it in right under our noses, which is why we're here today. This is why we're taking action, because there's just, so many, Steve.
The Telecommunications Act, I believe, was changed not so long ago to define a low impact. And so the nuts and the bolts of that is that my understanding is that, you know, while you're at work, a telco could come in, stick one of these 5G devices on the corner of your house and you have no say in it, right?
What I would like to say specific to the question about this area is that because of the nature of the terrain here, the most useful from a practical physics point of view, the most useful frequencies are the lower frequencies. So initially we'll be getting the 3.6 gigahertz here, which is very similar to what the NBN is on at around 3.4. And what that means for us is that those upper higher frequencies that some people have particular concerns because they haven't been widespread yet with mobile technology, most of those higher frequencies won't be practical around here, so they are more likely to be in the CBDs. But because those higher frequencies, like the 26 and 28 gigahertz, they don't penetrate through or go around objects very well, it's not likely to be deployed as much in the countryside. However, in saying that, the satellite technology then steps in, which is reported to be around the same frequencies, which is the currently ground to space spectrum, which is reserved for that communication. Yep.
Can I just ask if the satellite technology is blanketing around the ionosphere, but it's a short wave, the frequency is a shorter wave, so that's why we need more antennas down on the ground. So how does that, if it's 7,000 kilometres above, how is that carrying down and affecting us?
Sure. As I understand it, the current satellites are already broadcasting in that spectrum, in that those higher frequencies. And it's not such a problem to get the energy from up in space down to here because there's no objects really to get around. There is atmospheric interference, so the transmission is impeded by storm clouds, etc. But there's no objects, trees, buildings, and walls to penetrate and that sort of thing. So satellite would be useful for open spaces, essentially. Did that answer your question, or? Sure. It's not necessarily. Now I understand. It's not necessarily about the distance that the signal will propagate. It has more to do with where it's still useful because of its depth of penetration. So the higher the frequency, the less it penetrates into matter. But it has hardly been tested. So it hasn't been proliferated like mobile phone technology, so it's a massive unknown as well. I think that's something there's a massive push to start using those frequencies, and even the Australian government is pushing ahead of the international regulatory bodies for those frequencies, or there's like an international regulatory body to harmonise all of these the frequency uses. The Australian government is currently pushing ahead, which always makes me feel concerned. It can take so long to get bills through Parliament for certain things, but something like this is just snap, snap, snap. It's very quick.
Look, the IEEE, the international body, they have information on 5G. It's all technical, right? And one of the key things they say is that water is a problem. Okay, so now think about that. All life contains water, right? All water. So, but water attenuates the signal, and that is a technical problem. And so we heard earlier about trees, etc., etc., etc. And they've already started chopping down tens of thousands of trees in a number of British cities in the UK for 5G. Yeah, because the other thing is that not only do the trees attenuate the signal, they die. And so people start asking questions. So the best thing to do is get rid of the trees. And people move around, dogs move around, pets move around. It's not as obvious. No, that's, no. Look, one final point on this is Auntie June Gordon of the Bundjalung Nation several years ago told me, she said, if we look after country, country looks after us. And one of the things Australia has in our favour is gum trees. And believe it or not, gum trees are a major problem for all this microwave radiation because they are our best friend. They actually really do block it.
Yeah, I can attest to that. Actually, I was on ABC Radio last Friday and they had some pro-5G advocates on, and, you know, one of the things he said is exactly that. Oh, it's the bloody gum trees getting away out in the country. Like, you know, like that was a bad thing. Like, wow, that's what we're dealing with. Okay, so what's happening now is Sam is crawling across the floor. We're going to take a break. We've got to take a break just really briefly because these guys are in the process of getting Ray Broomhall on the line. This is really exciting.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to our esteemed colleague, Mr. Raymond Broomhall, who's a barrister at law, and heart of gold, a wonderful man, and we just are very grateful for the presence of Raymond. I'll hand you over to Ray.
Thank you everyone for having me. And I consider this mine developed over the few years. what we use in Australia, and the equivalent the US uses is 60 hertz. So in layman's terms, if a person's exposed to a 50 hertz electric field, then that person would actually receive an electric pulse 50 times per second within that 50 hertz field. Okay? Now, let's look at 5G. So, in essence, 1 hertz, you will get 1 cycle or electric pulse per second. His study was at 50 cycles per second, which was the electric field in those days. 5G, folks, will be in the 2.4 gigahertz range to 5 gigahertz range. And what this means is that we will be exposed to 5,000 million hertz per second. Which what that means is it's, in essence, it's 5 billion hertz a cycle per second is what we'll be exposed to. Can you still hear me, folks?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Shock. Hang on, let me come here again.
Yeah, well, okay, great. Okay. So, what I want to explain now is that 5 billion hertz is the cycle per second that we're exposed to. The leukemia study was only 50 cycles per second. Now, I'm going to go to the World Health Organization, and there's a publication which is very, very, it's available to everyone, and it's called Electromagnetic Fields, EMF. And it's on www.int/PEMF publications facts. Now this is a background that was produced in 2007. I'm just going to read something to you. Childhood leukemia is a comparatively rare disease with a total annual number of new cases estimated to be 49,000 worldwide in 2000. Average magnetic field exposures above 0.3 microtesla in homes are rare. It is estimated that only between 1% and 4% of children live in such conditions. If the association between magnetic fields and childhood leukemia is causal, then the number of cases worldwide might be attributable to magnetic field exposure, which is estimated to range from 100 to 2,400 cases per year, based on values for the year 2000, representing from 0.2 to 4.9% of the total incidence for that year. Thus, if ELF magnetic fields actually do increase the risk of the disease, when considered in a global context, the exposure on public health ELF EMF exposure would be limited. A number of other adverse health effects have been studied for possible association with ELF magnetic field exposure, and these include other childhood cancers, cancers in adults, depression, suicide, cardiovascular disorders, reproductive dysfunction, development disorders, immunological modifications, neurobehavioural effects, and neurodegenerative disease. Now, what this was, folks, is that the World Health Organization, through its own organisation called the International Agency for Research on Cancer, which is ICNO, they classified magnetic fields above 4 microtesla as possibly being carcinogenic, and that's where the possible carcinogenic thing came from in regards to the leukemia issue. Now, what I'm saying here, folks, is that the PANSA standards do not cover that frequency. It only covers 3 kilohertz to 300 gigahertz. Okay? 3 kilohertz is equivalent to 3,000 hertz. So anything lower than that, the standards do not cover us. And what's concerning is that the study done by Bruce Hocking and all the studies around the world in regards to leukemia had a lot lower frequency than what the standards protect us from. So that is a huge concern. Now, if I go back to what the WHO was saying, that average magnetic field exposures of over 0.3 microteslas in home are rare. And this is the cause for leukemia, so they're very concerned over that. Well, this was done way back in 2007. We are now in 2019. A lot of the devices that we use, such as our mobile phones and laptops, etc., we just did a basic recording on our mobile phone, and it was 0.6 to 0.7 microteslas. Yet the WHO was saying that at over 0.3 microteslas in home is rare, and that's where the cancer was caused. Now, that's a concern, and I think we need to, if you could, try and address that and see what can be raised. Now, the other thing I'd like to talk about is the precautionary principle, and I can see that Kim and Tashi did a wonderful job, and I just want to explain to you a little bit about what the precautionary principle is, and so you'll have a little bit of an understanding of how it applies with council, how it applies with the federal government and state government. So in essence, the precautionary principle is such that if threats of damage to the health of the public are identified by whatever means, then lack of full scientific certainty should not be used as a reason for postponing measures to address or reduce such risks as they arise. Now, the exercise of the precautionary principle concerning ecologically sustainable development is a primary consideration as found within New South Wales state policy and is reflected and required to be applied in numerous provisions within New South Wales legislation. Now what I'm saying here is that after both the telcos and the council become aware of the risk of harm to health as qualified expert evidence by a medical practitioner, then they'll have a general environmental duty to apply the precautionary principle when making their decisions. Now, I've interpreted the APANSA standard and the APANSA advices that they've made to the public, and I've done that in a legal context as it pertains to emitters of electromagnetic radiation. My opinion is that if the telcos and council make the decision to continue to proceed with the installation of any facility without changing their to address the risk of harm to health, and they are aware of such risk, then they will not have applied the precautionary principle as required by law. Okay? Now, in my opinion, neither the telcos nor the council are protected from civil and criminal liability if they only follow APANSA's advice and its APANSA standard in preference to medical advice. Now, what I'm saying here is that the precautionary principle can be found and it's embedded within the APANSA standard. And the obvious example that can be found is in the foreword of the APANSA standard. Now, the foreword was written by the then CEO of APANSA, John Boyd, and in that foreword, he recommends strongly that EMR emitters adopt, in essence, the precautionary principle whilst engaged in their EMR exposure activities. Now, I'm going to read an extract from that foreword. It is recognised that the standard does not operate in isolation from the legal framework within Australia. Relevant Australian occupational health, safety and environmental laws provide obligations on employers and the designers, manufacturers and suppliers of plant and equipment to ensure that their activities or their plant and equipment do not represent a risk to the health and safety of their employees or third parties who may be affected by them. In essence, folks, we're the third parties. In effect, such laws require relevant parties to continually assess and improve the health and safety impact of their activities. Now that is the precautionary principle at play. Now, the main standards, the APANSA standards' main goal is that an EMR emitter's primary obligation is to ensure that their activities do not represent a risk to the health and safety of the people, and that once aware of a risk to health and safety, that they must improve the health and safety impact of that risk. Now, The precautionary principle must be the primary relevant consideration adopted by telcos and the council as to whether to proceed with the installation of the facility. Any supporting person or entity that approves or in some way is involved. Sorry?
Thank you, Ray. We're running out of time because we've only got the hall for another 5 minutes.
Oh, sorry. Oh, my apologies.
No, not at all. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Is there a 1 minute take-home message in layman's terms too, please, now for the ladies and gentlemen sitting in the hall here?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is that when you raised the issue of use with Wilkins Creek, and I thought that was great. That the council has got note as to the medical to members of Wilson's Creek Group. Now, because it had been given that, and I'm glad you raised that with them at the council meeting, and I think that's extremely important. I stressed, I must push that about the medical advice that was provided, okay? We've been put on notice as to that. Now, the councillors, if they make a decision against that, they should apply what happened at Wilson's Creek. If they go against that, then we've got some issues. And I would suggest that you get some legal advice or something later on. Good. I guess that's, I know we're running out of time, I'm sorry folks. Okay. Do you have a Q&A that with?
So this is just a quick little calls to action, because you know when we leave here we want to feel empowered to make a difference. So writing to federal ministers demanding safety assurance, questioning our pains of integrity. You know, you can go via phone, Facebook, email, engaging with our local councils and helping them halt the rollout. So helping. Asking your doctors to write a letter of concern regarding EMR exposure and the scientifically proven evidence showing harm to health. There's petitions online that you can sign to halt the Wi-Fi in schools. Even go as far as contacting local schools and requesting the Department of Education to hardwire and get rid of the powerful Wi-Fi around the children. And we also, you know, Shearwater up the road is the only school that I know of that actually has hardwired in the Byron Shire. So, you know, using the positive examples of what's already happening in the community can be really impactful as well. And yeah, engaging in the future Byron Rally, which is going to have to happen. Next up we have Ido. He's an award-winning singer-songwriter, mantra musician, yogi, global activist. He is the co-founder of A Sound Life, Australia's first charity to bring free music, yoga and meditation programs to people in need. A Sound Life recently launched the Sound Life Dome in Sydney pop-up, a space for community, connection, creativity, good causes and social impact. Yeah.
So Kate asked if I'd come and share the song that I wrote when we stopped the Wilson's Creek Tower. I'm happy to share it. Since then I've written a sequel about the 5G, so I can share both with you if you want. It's up to you, I know you've been here a while. I'm going to have a what do you call it? Strap. That's alright, just old school. We moved from the city to live somewhere pretty, where the air runs clean and the water's pristine. A paradise wonder of beauty and peace, a place they call Wilson's Creek. The hills are alive and the rainforest sings. The wildlife roams and the wallabies spring. The platypus swim in the rivers and stream in a place we call Wilson's Creek. Koalas they happily sway in the breeze. Our children they play, breathing with ease. We love in the quiet the songs of the birds in a place we call Wilson's Creek. But people in power they like to build towers, fill them with wires that radiate death, then violate nature, destroy all her beauty. What good is reception in exchange for our health? Build up or cut down or drill in the earth. It's a curse for our country, a curse for our world. But this just keeps happening again and again, all over the world. Pain after pain, so we rise up together, make a stand for our land. We rise up and say it until we are heard. No, not in my backyard. No, not in my backyard. Well, it's the things they don't tell you, the research they squash, the laws that they bend to get what they want. It's all for the dollar, it's not for our sake. Let's get the full picture and see what's at stake. 'Cause time goes on and we start looking back. Why did we do that? We must have been mad. It's not for our need, it's all for the greed. We're rightly concerned about costly misdeeds, but this just keeps happening again and again, all over the world. Pain after pain, so we rise up together, make a stand for our world. We rise up and say it until we are heard. No, not in my backyard. 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 Okay, and here's the sequel. It's sort of a work in progress. Just got written a few days ago. It's called Safe. Bit hard to do this one without a strap. Well, you start one tower, then they shoot you from space. You run from all the toxins, then they spray it in your face. Is it progress or commerce? Does your science measure pain? If you listen deep inside you, you can hear before it rains. We don't need to be right. We just wanna be safe, living free from all harm before it's too late. You can silence the people, you can silence the truth, but when the whole world is on fire, we won't need any more proof. it's always hard to salvage what you've already destroyed. It takes so long to turn back once you're so far down the road. We don't need to be right, we just want to be safe, living free from all harm before it's too late. We don't need to be right, we just want to be safe, living free from all harm before it's too late. What are we waiting for? What are we waiting for? There's no time, there's no time to waste. There's no time, there's no time to waste. Wake up, stand up, get up for the world. Wake up, stand up, get up for the world. Wake up, stand up, get up for the world. Wake up, stand up, get up for the world. Wake up, stand up, get up for the world. Wake up, stand up, get up for the world. Wake up, stand up, get up for the world. Wake up, stand up, get up for the world. Wake up, stand up, get up for the world. Wake up, stand up, get up for the world. There's no time, there's no time to waste. Thank you. Hope you guys had a beautiful afternoon. I was knocking my head out building sheep pens. Glad I could make it for the end. Thanks.
Thank you.
Wow. Oh, thank you so much, Leo. That was really powerful. What a way to end the delivery of this huge message. And I think you just captured it through this beautiful creative expression. I hope your clip goes viral and we can celebrate your beautiful message. Okay, what an afternoon. I just want to thank all the events crew, amazing panel. Thank you, Kim, for emceeing. Thank you for all the techie heads, and also to all the people, you know what you brought to this, and it's been a really big build up for a couple of months, and I'm really proud of us all for making it to this point. And yeah, watch out, Byron Rally to come. All right, signing off.
We don't need to be right, we just want